I'm a bilingual middle school teacher. I teach Spanish language arts, ESL, and social studies to kids in seventh and eighth grade who are in their first couple years in the country. And I teach at one of the largest public elementary schools in the city of Chicago. We have over 1,000 students, which is pretty big for an elementary school over here. I'm also at a school that just last year received, and I'm jumping into it here already. Last year, when Republican governors of Texas, Greg Abbott, and Ron DeSantis in Florida were human trafficking kids up to Florida, from Florida and from Texas in buses and dropping them off under viaducts in the middle of the night. My school is one of the schools that received many, many, many kids. Like my school has over 100 kids who were most likely sleeping in the police precinct across Pulaski Avenue, which is the big avenue near our school. So we are one of the welcoming schools, like many schools in CPS are and have been. And I have spent the last 11 years in CPS teaching migrant kids from grade 1 to grade 8. I worked as a bilingual ed coordinator for 7 years. And this year I'm back in the classroom just teaching full time. And yeah, that's where I'm at. A side note, I don't know if I don't necessarily want to be represented as such, but I'm also the chair of the CTU Bilingual Ed Committee, and I was a member of the big bargaining team for our last contract. But I guess for the purpose of today's interview, I'm just kind of speaking as a teacher, as myself, and not representing CTU,
Sounds
even though I'm wearing CTU right here.
yeah.
But that's I just always wear this hoodie. So
Guess I can start with the questions I had and then feel free to interweave that wherever. But the first question I just had was broad. Like, what's the situation like right now in Chicago? Obviously there's been ICE raids, very dramatic ICE raids, and potential National Guard deployment. So how have teachers and communities been fighting back, defending themselves to defend immigrant communities?
well, starting with what's going on in Chicago, it is literally a campaign of state terror against the city of Chicago. This is not just your run-of-the-mill Biden Obama deportation machine. What's going on right now is a particularly how do I say this, abhorrent piece of political propaganda. And the reason I say this is because even before Trump got reelected, he was promising war against major American cities that for some reason he doesn't like. And I actually know why he doesn't like us, because we have a labor history, because we have a history of working class resistance, because we welcome immigrants in our cities. And that goes against the simple one-dimensional country that he and his posse envision. So they really do believe in using state power to try to control the demographic shift that's happening in this country. And they're doing it very explicitly, very openly, because they want to maintain a white majority in the United States. So they see their role as ethno-nationalists, the Steve Bannons out there, the Stephen Millers out there. They do see ICE, they do see HSI, they do see CBP as a force, like Dolores Huerta recently said in a Democracy Now! Interview, of ethnically cleansing the United States to try to maintain a white majority. And it doesn't matter what they do, the white majority is out the window, right? The population of this country is shifting. We're going to have a plurality very soon. Um, but they do see it as their duty to try to maintain a white majority at whatever costs. And right now, Chicago's in the crosshairs. So what we're seeing is daily raids happening across the city, from the south to the west to the north side. They kicked it off by parading their militarized Proud Boys. Basically, that's what they are, through downtown, just trying to grab anybody who was brown. And you might have seen that one viral video where a guy on an electric bike was able to get away. And that's where it started. And we figured, okay, they got their one shot. But then we started seeing every single day. I'll give you an example. I live in Albany Park on the northwest side of the city. It is it is not uncommon that now I wake up at 5:30 in the morning. Soon after waking up, I hear federal helicopters hovering over our neighborhood. And they are going over our school buildings, and so close to our schools, in fact, that last Friday, our pre-K students had to have their recess canceled because the helicopter was so close and shaking, vibrating the building, right? If you can imagine a child who already comes in with trauma, who already comes up with their guard way up, ready to learn, ready to engage, and all they can hear is a helicopter. That's not just damaging us teachers and our morale and our ability to do our jobs effectively. That is damaging the first school experiences that preschoolers and kindergarteners are having ever in their whole lives. So they're always going to associate the sounds of helicopters, the feeling of just, they know what's going on. Even the little kids know what's going on. But my kids, the seventh and eighth graders who are 13 and 14 years old, definitely know what's going on. It's affecting all of us. We just last week could hear neighborhood volunteers blowing their whistles from my classroom. We have had situations like at Funston Elementary School where they had to cause a call for a lockdown because ICE dropped tear gas canisters right outside of a school building. Um, just example after example after example of schooling being interrupted when CPS is one of the fastest improving big school districts in the country. We are making growth in CPS, and part of that is because of the leadership of Mayor Brandon Johnson. Part of what we were able to bargain is for these historic investments in public schools. We still have our challenges, but compared to where we've been, we have 80% of kids who are graduating. CPS not that long ago was graduating 50% of kids, right? We are making growth. And now what we're seeing is a federal government who is impeding us moving in the right direction. They're suing CPS for our Black Student Success Plan. They've already pulled $8 million, which in CPS terms isn't that much, but that's just the beginning. They're dismantling the Department of Education that pays $20 billion to Title I schools like mine. You know they're going to gut Title III funds, which are for immigrant ELL, English language learning kids. This is a mixed program of austerity, which has mostly been on the Democrats' agenda for the recent history. But now it's mixed in with a kind of ethno-nationalist fascism that wants to use every state organ and every state institution to instill a far extreme right agenda through every mechanism that it can. That's what we're feeling right now. I know that that doesn't encompass it. That doesn't encompass the kids who are showing up after having parents abducted or who are going back home and finding homes that are empty. It does not encompass the amount of absences that I'm now seeing. Kids whose parents are too afraid to enroll them in after school or before school activities, parents who are too afraid to come to report card pickup. It is destroying, really, really harming the fabric of our school communities in a way that I can't even encompass in this conversation. I'll add that they have now even gone onto school campuses. 2 weeks ago, federal agents went on to Decatur Elementary School, which is very close to where I teach, and they grabbed someone who was doing yard work, an employee who was hired to be at the school, and they grabbed him from campus. So if you can imagine them stepping onto a green space at a school with children inside of the building, we know that the next step is going to be for them to try to come into the buildings. So I'll jump into the next step is how are we preparing? How are we responding? CPS and CTU have come to agreement that every school needs a sanctuary team, and that sanctuary team needs to be active in preparing schools, not just for if ICE comes knocking, but what if they take a parent while the kid's at school, right? What if they show up at a field trip or a school event or during recess around the school building? So we have enacted these sanctuary teams. I'm on my team. I'll also add, it took the union pushing for CPS to agree to allow us to formally have these teams. And we had to push for a very long time to get them to agree to it. But I was at the meeting where they did a joint announcement. We had someone from the principals union and folks from our union who came in agreement and said, these are the documents we want you to use. This is how you can prepare for if they come knocking. This is the difference between a civil warrant and an administrative warrant and a warrant signed by an actual immigration judge, kind of those basics. And what we've been able to do in addition to that with our contract is we've been able to harden our schools in a way that we shouldn't have to, right? Our jobs are hard. We shouldn't have to think about whether masked secret police are coming to steal kids or steal parents. We already were teaching in a carceral state. We were already teaching in an over-policed and and over, and neighborhoods where mass incarceration is destroying the fabric already. Now, if you add on top of that a secret police that's specifically tasked for snatching brown people and people of color off the street without letting their families know that they're gone, without their A numbers appearing in the ICE database, I know that there are people who have just been grabbed off the street who are now rotting away in secret torture prisons in Libya, in El Salvador, in Louisiana, in places where there is no oversight, where there's no form at all of legal representation or due process. This is the secret prison state that the United States has always been, but on steroids. So this is where we're at. This is how I feel it as an educator. We're all hurting. It's up the top of everybody's mind.
My follow-up question was just to elaborate a little bit about, yeah, like what you've been doing at your own school. I know I saw that video of how you have whistles coordinated with community members. Um, I've also I also heard you talk about a little bit about like contingency plans and things like that. But yeah, just not that you have to go into every detail, but what are some of the broad ways that you've been organizing that you haven't already touched?
Yeah, the walking school bus is one that's been challenging, but a lot of kids have been trying to take advantage of that. And for folks who don't know, that it is what it sounds like. It is a group of adults who will help parents who can't or don't want to leave the house for safety issues to walk their kids safely to and from school. Now, there's been some pushback around from CPS around like whether teachers are officially allowed to do it like as a job function, even though you're not on the clock, you're donating your time. As far as I'm concerned, like I'm a responsible adult. I have written consent from your parent. This is my time. I'm no longer on the clock. I'm doing what my community needs me to do. Um, in addition to that, I talked about the grocery donations. I had another one for y'all about lines of communication. So we do have like a signal chat going on with our sanctuary team. And we're also very connected to the 33rd Ward, who our alderperson is Rosana Rodriguez. She's a Democratic Socialist who's our city council rep, essentially, our alderperson. And the 33rd Ward has been very proactive with putting together these neighborhood watches, these volunteers who I see them as early as 6:30 in the morning, standing on every street corner around the school buildings in the neighborhood with their whistles, with their phones in hand, keeping an eye out. There are lines of communication that have been vetted in between those folks and then people in the school buildings. That way, if we see something, we let them know. If they see something, they let us know. If there's been raids during the school day while we're in the building, and there have been many, many, we will often see them lining the sidewalks as we're dismissing kids out. It really is something you can feel. It's something that you can perceive. Something is different. Something is different. The community, at least in the 33rd Ward, and I know other neighborhoods in the city, have really been proactive in getting organized. Mhm.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned a little bit about the groceries. I can only imagine that's even more, present now with the food and the SNAP benefits currently on pause and already being eroded. Just obviously the Trump administration has been systematically attacking public education, as you've already talked about. You mentioned dissolving the DOE, defunding schools. We've also seen attacks on academic freedom from the K through 12, but also especially at the university level, attacks on DEI, trans students, plus all of these broader attacks on just the qualities of living that impact beyond schools that allow people to learn and whatever in safety. So yeah, what do you think is the broader role that educators and workers at schools can play in fighting back against Trump's attacks on education?
Well, I think we need to recognize why they're coming after public education is because public education's always been a thorn in the side of the right wing of this country, and now they have an opportune kind of timing and political machinery to finally dismantle the last kind of universal system that is for everybody in the country. They can't stand that any single child and that every single child who happens to be in the US has the right to an education. They can't stand being taxed for it. And what particularly triggers them is that undocumented children get a free education in the United States, although there are serious barriers to higher education for undocumented students in the US. But at least for K-12, this is the final frontier around a universal, freely accessible program in the United States, and that's why they want to privatize it to the end, and they want to cut it up, or what is the term, the death by a thousand cuts, and that's why Linda McMahon is the perfect person, because this is someone who doesn't even have a substitute license, couldn't do what I do for a single day, or what y'all do for a single day, yet now she is charged with basically destroying the Department of Education by design. Um, and then our role as teachers actually quite overlaps with our role as a working class, as organized union, as what am I saying, as unionized labor, is the role that we've always had with far right wing politics. Our role has always been to be the first line of defense and the strongest line of defense against fascism and against totalitarianism, because we have the numbers and because we have the productive capacity that the billionaire class just doesn't have, right? So, like, if educators decided that there was going to be a national strike, if educators decided that there was going to be a general strike from coast to coast, that means that parents would also have to stay home. And if parents also have to stay home, that means that the employers and the corporations that depend on their labor would grind to a halt. The crux of creating the general strike today, nowadays, is through public education. We have to come to a halt to stop their machinery from kidnapping our children, from kidnapping our parents, from terrorizing our community, from closing the Department of Education. That's why during the No Kings March, it kind of went viral that the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, was calling for a general strike. And I think that's language we have to start getting more comfortable with, even though it's fallen out of favor for a very long time in the US. There's a history of mass strike actions in this country that we just don't learn about. In fact, have been purposely removed from popular education to make us believe that the labor movement has always been as weak and as disempowered as it currently is. But I do see a turn coming, and I do see a turn either through, people who are already in unions, people who are gonna be in unions, and people who are not in unions. We're workers, right? Like, we're hurting more than we have in a very long time. And the stark division between the billionaire class really hijacking our government. I mean, just look at this ridiculous ballroom that was just built where the East Wing used to be. They're just they're bidding just very openly to control, to have financial control over what we get to do and what we don't get to do with as public policy. So I do think a turn in politics is coming, and I think that at the crux of it is the general strike, and that there is a rising tide of class consciousness that the left has to jump on, that we really have to take advantage of, that we have to push to its furthest degree, that we have to bring those contradictions to light in a way that is not just theoretical. We're not talking about, being what an armchair socialist. We're talking about seeing it in our neighborhoods, seeing how the mechanism of the state is very openly crushing the working class, and the working class is disproportionately brown and black in this country, and overwhelmingly disproportionately undocumented as well, immigrants. So this is why they're hating us, because they've always hated the poor, they've always hated the working class, and we've always fought back. This is how we got the 8-hour workday. This is how we got the right to unionize. This is how we got children out of mines, right? So let's talk about how we got to where the few protections that we do have, we got is because of the labor movement. It's time for a new labor movement. It's time for a new wave of labor power and labor actions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. I was just thinking how you're kind of reading my mind with the question progression because I was just gonna ask you a little bit about like this general strike question. And I guess maybe to emphasize a little bit more on the international aspect, because I think one thing that's been really inspiring me, I know, and a lot of people, but maybe has this sort of impossible feeling. But one thing that's been going on is workers taking up the power of the strike to fight against the genocide in Palestine, to defend the global Sumud flotilla that we saw, very, very inspiring general strike multiple days in Italy, and they're going to have another day. There have been, there have been oil workers in Brazil who've called on their government to stop supplying Israel with oil. There have been, just a lot of international solidarity with Palestine as well. And, just I bring this up because I see connections between these issues, and I wonder if you could speak to the connections, and also just yeah, like the power of workers and taking up beyond the bread and butter, but linking our bread and butter to political demands?
Yeah, that's great that you brought that question up. So in 2018, I spent 2 weeks in Palestine in Hebron with an organization called Youth Against Settlements. And what we were doing was documenting road closures, and we were documenting all of the daily harassment that Palestinians in Hebron have to live under. Like there's literally a section in the old town of Hebron where there's fencing above your head because Israeli settlers have taken over the second floor, basically, and they throw piss and they throw bleach and they throw rocks, and it's just really violent. It is apartheid. There's no doubting it. But what I bring that up because I got tear gassed in the West Bank, and then I got tear gassed on my street, right on the corner that I live in Chicago, in the third largest city in the U.S. And the manufacturer of that tear gas, it's the same company, right? And then when you see masked 21-year-olds, right? These are young guys who feel like they can play, God essentially in a city that they don't understand, in a culture that they don't understand. It really makes me think of these young IDF soldiers who come from the Netherlands and Canada and the US, who are not from Palestine, who then get free license to control the minutia of the life of someone who was born there and whose parent was born there and whose grandparent was born there, a Palestinian who has no rights to the land at all, right? So what I saw, it's not the same. I can't say it's the same. It's more extreme over there because they're further along that road of like, of ethnic cleansing. And, that's basically what Steve Miller wants to do with brown people in the US, let's be real. But what I saw was a kind of treatment and a kind of untouchability on behalf of the state, that the parallels in between those IDF soldiers in the West Bank, who many times train police, federal agents, Chicago police have gone there, New York police have gone there. We see this massive militarization of our internal policing because imperialism has come home to breed, basically, right? So all those weapons that have been manufactured, all that know-how in oppression, all of the surveillance state, they have drones flying in Chicago now. They have federal agents have drones and helicopters in Chicago. All of that machinery of war was fine-tuned and tested in Palestine, was in Venezuela right now. The US is about to start another war. When Libya, the Obama administration destabilized that country. Till today, it's a country where people are being sold into modern day slavery and all sorts of atrocities. I mean, the list goes on. We know the list of US interventions around the world, but that was never going to stay outside of the borders of the United States. That came home. It is home. It's been home. And now it's fine tuned to a degree that we can't doubt the connections between an internal oppressive apparatus of the state and imperialism in other countries, right? Many of these people maybe have all served overseas and are coming home with all this untreated post-traumatic stress and are ready to just point guns at people in their country because they're all hyped up on Joe Rogan and Newsmax and all the right-wing sphere that's out there, that have convinced them that now is time for civil war. They have been wanting civil war. There is this lingering hatred that they still have from the Civil War, because the South was never fully held accountable for trying to secede and rip the country apart. So there's this lingering hatred that somehow this billionaire from New York was able to tap into to really divide people in a way that we haven't been divided in a long time in this country. So the connections between imperialism abroad and the oppression domestically is not just the actual weapons, but also the know-how and the ideology of using state power to crush the people at the bottom. And that's what's happening right now. I'll also say on the order of on the issue of anti-imperialism and what we see that's causes hope. I'm very hopeful with Gustavo Petro in Colombia right now. This is somebody who I've never heard somebody in the modern era calling for an international force to invade and stop the genocide in Gaza. That's what Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, said at the United Nations. Gustavo Petro also went out to a rally where I think he said something that they revoked his visa for. This is somebody who was calling on Colombian immigrants in the United States to join a general strike. This is somebody who the left needs to pay attention to, and in a good way. So I do see hope there. Obviously, I see hope. I'm Brazilian. I was born in Brazil. I'm a naturalized citizen, but I do see hope in Lula. Obviously, what just happened in Rio is the most disgusting example of police brutality, of just a straight up massacre, biggest one in Brazilian history, and that says a lot. But I also think there's a connection in between the right wing governor of Rio de Janeiro state, who's trying to show up to the Trump administration and trying to make the federal government look bad. I think there's some of that going on. Um, and around Palestine, I've been active on the Palestinian issue for since I was maybe 15 years old, so about 20 years. Um, we back then used to debate whether we were looking at a two-state solution or one-state solution. And nowadays, the left, the progressive left at least, is 100% lockstep on a one-state democratic solution for Israelis and Palestinians. So what I mean to say with that is that the momentum after 2 years of genocide has has elevated our political dialogue in a way that in the US, at least 10 or 15 years ago, was completely, relegated to the margin, was really just like the radical extremist or whatever they wanted to call it. Now is the mainstream, at least on the progressive left, on Palestine. People are talking about apartheid. People are talking about decolonialism. People are talking about a one-state solution, a democratic solution. And people are also critically looking at the issue of resistance. So, like, what rights do people who are being completely genocided have to fight against their oppression? So there's so many interesting ways that this really gut-wrenching genocide that everybody has now seen on their phones on every single screen has pushed the American population in a way that we can't go back. There is no going back. There's no consensus on Israel anymore. It's broken, and thank God it's broken.
All right, so I'm gonna ask the next question. Is we're gonna take it back to the immigrant defense topic, and it's kind of a two-part question. So, our union passed a resolution in the June Delegate Assembly to encourage chapters to create sanctuary teams. So definitely feels like a difference in language. It sounds like in Chicago, it's like, no, you need to have a sanctuary team. The UFT it doesn't feel as concrete or actionable. And we know that especially with our impending election tomorrow, that like we're high on the list to be the next city Trump comes for. So kind of two questions about that is like a lot of our members are like, well, what is the UFT going to do to support us creating sanctuary teams? So we're curious how you feel like what has CTU done to support this work at schools. I know that is kind of like a top-down idea, but maybe it's like, well, what could we demand of the UFT and like say like, this is what CTU has done, this is what we need from you. And then also what else would you tell teachers about um how to organize to defend their immigrant students and fight for our rights?
Yeah, around the union issue, um, it started in the school buildings. It started when people started getting disappeared and we all were under threat. And people just started meeting. They started sitting down and say, what now? So I think from that place, we on the union side started noticing that like people are going to organize. What we need to do is provide direction and structure. We need to formalize things so that the organizing is as productive as it can be. Um, we started even before this current surge, this current whatever is happening in Chicago. We started providing like sanctuary team workshops and like know your rights workshops on the regular in our union hall. And it created a physical space, and we did virtually as well. But and we did multiple. It was not a one-off. It was like, here's your sanctuary team 101 meeting. Here's the follow-up. I helped lead the follow-up one. It's been so constantly present in our union hall and in our virtual spaces that like every school has heard about it. Every teacher who teaches immigrants or ELs knows about it. Even sometimes we have paired with just a couple weeks ago at Roosevelt High School, which is right also in my school community. Our union partnered with the alderperson, Rosana Rodriguez, partnered with some of the community organizations like I can't remember right now, but we partnered with some other folks to basically take over an entire high school for all of a Saturday. And we had breakout sessions in different classrooms. So like if you're a teacher, go to this one. If you're a parent, go to this one. If you're a volunteer, go to this one. If you want to do a walking school bus, go to this one. So it's like so many hands on deck because everybody in Chicago is pissed. Everybody in Chicago is pissed. Like you do not need to be a raging socialist to be involved in the immigrant rights movement right now in Chicago. Like obviously I am, and many of us are because the intersectional kind of aspect there. But everybody's upset to see tear gas going off. Just last week, a Halloween parade in Old Irving Park, which is like kind of a ritzy residential area, to be honest. They got tear gassed at 9 in the morning and they had to cancel a Halloween parade for little children. So like even your run of the mill, just like parent is at a place right now where they see what's going on and there's no ambiguity about it. So back to the union issue. Yes, I'm no longer a school delegate. I stepped back when I became chair of the committee. So I haven't been able to vote or speak on any of the motions coming out recently. But even before the surge, we were talking about creating sanctuary teams. We were talking about formalizing those processes, about offering training in our building and virtually. I know as the chair of the bilingual committee, we make it a priority at every single meeting to discuss how is your sanctuary team being developed, what do you need. We send surveys out. There's like a whole page. We bargained for CPS to release like a page long of resources around immigration rights and that sort of thing. So that's being released at least once a year. Yeah, I think it was kind of a culminating effort that started with folks just sitting down and figuring it out. And then the union figured out that like we need to make this doable for people in their school buildings. There's been town halls, there's been all sorts of ways. We have a page on our union website around like protecting your rights. The city of Chicago has now put out like a Know Your Rights page as well. So there's been some momentum for sure.
Nice. Yeah. I think I guess I could kind of had a follow-up, but I guess I could just end by I guess my question maybe just to follow up and this is the last one is we have especially in like a union like the UFT, we definitely have more in a ways like an ossified leadership, you could say, that like what would you say is like just if you had any words for like rank and file, you know what I'm saying? Like the rank and file who want to kind of fight for more. Um, Obviously it's a different context, I would say, but yeah, I guess that's my follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, don't fall for the trap of you have to bargain for your wages or you have to bargain for the well-being of your students. We get both. We work our asses off. We work unpaid hours before school, after school, weekends. You all know. So when we're talking about salary and benefits, and when we're talking about the rights of our students to dignity, to come to school without fear of deportation, to not have to worry about someone snatching their parent away, both of those are what we have to bargain for. And I'll also say that by getting it in your contract, not only are you empowering members to protect the community at the school level, but you're also using your contract as an educational tool. And what I mean by that is that you can go to the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and find all of our contracts all archived, right? They're like a historic artifact of the CTU and of your union as well, I assume. I want it so that years from now, folks can go back to our contracts and say they really, really care about immigrant kids and about our Black students and about our queer students and about the air and water in our school buildings and about housing in the neighborhood. That's the common good kind of practice of bargaining for your kids, bargaining for the common good, right? The idea that you can teach a kid grade level standards if they're homeless, if they're unhoused, if their parents just been taken from them, if there's 1,200 kids for one counselor in a high school, which there are, There's absolutely no way you can. So don't talk to me about standardized testing. Don't talk to me about grade level standards if your child is hungry. American schools are in crisis because American society is in crisis because we have refused to invest in the programs, in the systems, in a social safety safety net that actually guarantees a standard of living. And we're one of the few developed countries that does not do it. I would say that folks need to lean into caucus politics when it's productive, and without getting sideblinded by kind of sectarianism, like we have to stay united in our unions. But if at some point leadership or folks in influence in your union are drawing this false dichotomy of wages or bargaining for the common good, like that's a kind of thinking that needs to go, right? Like you simply cannot teach and then close your door and then ignore the society and context in which you teach. It's not possible. You can't do it. So many of us are burning out because we've been taught just close the door and teach your lesson. And then your kids are having a hard time, academically or behaviorally, and you feel unsatisfied at work, and your test scores are showing that you're not teaching. And then suddenly teaching is undoable, and we're out the door. Half of us leave by year 5, right? And then let's talk about teachers in West Virginia or in Florida who are basically in poverty teaching full time and ununionized, who are getting bullied out of their classrooms for like putting a rainbow up, right? This is where we're at with public education in the US. So organize your unions along your values. And if your values are liberation and working class organization, then that's how your contracts need to look, is what I would say. Teachers, especially now, are more receptive than we've been in a long time. Like we feel like we're part of a civil rights movement because we are part of a civil rights movement. We're fighting for the civil right of every child to receive an education. Whether that child sleeps under a viaduct or whether that child crossed the Darien Gap or whether that child has a parent or doesn't or anything, they need to have a safe and educational place that's paid for by the taxpayer and that is a public good for everybody. And that's why we do what we do.
Anything else you wanted to add that you feel like we didn't cover? I feel like it's great.
Yeah, like if there's young folks who are coming into their professional career changers out there, if you are bilingual, especially if you are a Spanish speaker, we sorely need you in Chicago public schools and in any large school district in the country. I'm a bilingual teacher because within kind of this context of an underfunded, understaffed, underinvested in public education sphere, it's even more dire for our immigrant kids who are learning English, who are new to the country. They are dealing with acute physical and mental trauma. These are wonderful kids who have walked across war zones and across continents to make it into your classroom. They need teachers who can understand them, who understand their culture, and who can help connect them to the resources. There are so many cases of kids just being dumped into the back of all English classrooms with no supports, many times being completely ignored. In the past, they used to just push these kids into like a special ed classroom. And now, at least in my experience, we're seeing kids who are just not even being considered for special ed support, for IEPs, for 504 plans because of a language barrier. So if you're bilingual, if this is something that's interesting to you, if you have an ESL endorsement, come into the areas of high need. We need more Latinx teachers. We need more teachers of color. We need more bilingual teachers like Pronto, like now.